So earlier this September, I had one of the most unbelievable opportunities to shoot the Canadian women's national soccer team during an Olympic qualifier here in Toronto. And as a lifelong soccer fan, as someone who's grown up around the game my entire life, getting the chance to shoot the national team was something that I couldn't turn down. And it was an experience that I truly will remember for the rest of my life as one of the coolest things I've ever gotten to shoot, period. Even though a lot of my work and my personal brand pertains to the work I'm currently doing with the NHL on a day-to-day basis, soccer has always had a very special place in my heart. I was born in Colombia, so soccer was really the first sport I had exposure to. It was the first sport I played growing up, and so whenever I have the opportunity to shoot it, no matter the level, it's something I rarely often turn down, and I enjoy every single time I get to go out there and do it. And ever since the news was released that the men's tournament was going to be in North America in 2026, I've kind of made it a personal mission of mine to do my best right now to put myself in the best situation possible to be creating content at the tournament by 2026, whether that's for a team, a venue, an outlet, or even an athlete. It's just a goal of mine that I wanted to achieve. And this recent work with Canada Soccer and the women's national team was a huge step for me in order to achieve that goal. However, considering I don't get to shoot soccer a lot of the time and that the World Cup is one of the biggest events in the sports world, I know that this opportunity isn't something that's necessarily going to come and show up on my doorstep. And I know I had to take initiative and make these opportunities happen for myself. So earlier in September, I looked at the calendar, I noticed the national team had an Olympic qualifier here in Toronto, and I shot my shot within my network and my contacts and my attempt to land a credential for the game. Fast forward, I had an unbelievable experience shooting the game. I got a credential through Canada Soccer and got to work with their creative team directly, which is an opportunity that I hope opens more doors into the future and puts me in a better position heading into 2026. And one thing I wanted to make sure I got out of this experience as well was a portfolio piece for myself. Because Canada Soccer just hired me to shoot content for them, I didn't actually have to edit anything afterwards. However, I made sure I took the time to edit a piece for myself in my portfolio. I ended up putting together kind of a one-game cinematography reel, a compilation of all my best shots, and I got to edit it to one of my favorite songs ever. And if you guys haven't seen it, I'll leave it down in the description below for you guys to check out. Again, this wasn't something that I had to do for Canada Soccer, but I wanted to do for myself because it's a showcase of my shooting and editing abilities, which again, I hope pays dividends down the line when it comes to finding an opportunity to shoot the World Cup in 2026. I learned a lot of things through this process that I want to share with you guys. So in this video, we're going to talk about just that. I want to talk about how I actually used my network to get a credential and find myself at the game. I want to talk about the gear I used to shoot the game and my mindset while I was there. But I also want to talk about the importance of pitching yourself as a content creator and offering value with your work. It's one thing to have a large network and know a lot of people, but it's a whole other different thing entirely when you have to pitch your skill set and the value you offer as a content creator, which is one of the things I'm really excited to talk about in this video. As a sports content creator, the main thing I get asked all the time is, how do you get credentials to these big level sporting events? How do you get access to shoot and cover these games? And it really is as easy as just reaching out to your network and just asking. And I know the idea of reaching out and asking for credentials can be incredibly scary, but there's a right way of going about it. And also, there's a saying that's always stuck with me throughout my career, and that is, if you don't ask, the answer will always be no. I think we've gotten into this bad habit as content creators in recent years where we think by just posting our work, opportunities will show up, and we get disappointed when they don't. And while sharing your work online is a great way to find gigs and opportunities to shoot games, as it's happened for me, I think a lot of the times, if you really want to be in an event, if you really want to shoot a particular game, sometimes you have to take the initiative and reach out and offer your services first. If opportunity doesn't knock on your door, you need to go knock on opportunity's door yourself. So about a year or two ago, I actually received a message from someone who worked at a creative agency that was aligned with Canada Soccer, and they offered me some editing work with the men's team during the 2022 Men's World Cup. And as awesome as that opportunity was, I unfortunately had to turn it down. It kind of coincided right as the NHL season was picking up, so I already had a lot on my plate, so I unfortunately had to say no. Saying no to an opportunity like that was not an easy thing to do. However, I kind of really believe in a proper work-life balance these days and not overloading myself. And also, I know that when I commit to something, I want to deliver 100% of what I'm offering. I was very transparent with them, told them I was really appreciative of the opportunity, but unfortunately, it wasn't the right time for me. They totally understood, and I really made an emphasis for them to know that despite this, I would love to find further opportunities to work with them in the future and to reach out to me if they ever needed anything else. Fast forward to this year, like I said, I knew the women's national team had a qualifier here in Toronto, so my first goal was being as proactive as possible to communicate to them that I was interested in helping out in any capacity possible. Now, I could have obviously waited to see if they'd reach out to me and see if I'd be interested. However, nothing like that is ever guaranteed. And at this point, it had been a year or so since we last talked. And so I probably wasn't on their radar as much as I was back then. So I went back into my message and reached back out to my contact at Canada Soccer and basically said, hey, I noticed you guys have a game here at the end of the month and I would love to be part of your team and provide value from any creative standpoint that I'm able to, whether it's editing for you guys before or after the game or even being there to capture content. I would love to find a way to finally work with you guys. Feel free to reach out. I would just love to provide value and help you guys out in any way you need. I also let them know that I would be willing to do this work for free. Now, I know free work is a pretty controversial topic, and I know early on in your career, it's kind of something you have to do. I really do think if people are reaching out to you to shoot content for them, you are kind of in the clear here to ask them for their budget or offer your rates. However, if you are the one reaching out to the brand or the team or the company to shoot for them, you kind of are in a tough spot to ask for money. And in this case, I knew very well that all I wanted to offer them was an exchange of service. They would get my skills as a cinematographer and they would get my videos and footage at the end of the night. And all I wanted in exchange was access to shoot the game, which Canada Soccer was very happy to accommodate. They were happy to provide me a credential and have me on their creative team for the night. And all they asked of me was to stay an hour or two after the game and provide them with a 4 to 5 minute melt of my best footage from the game, which I was more than happy to do. And then a week later, I found myself at BMO Field about to shoot an Olympic qualifying game for the Canadian national women's soccer team. The lesson I hope you guys are taking away from this first part of the video is making sure that if you want access to sporting events, make sure you are doing your due diligence and reaching out and offering your services as a content creator. Sometimes a simple DM or email can do wonders for your career and can put you in situations that you wouldn't have imagined possible when you first started off. At the end of the day, the worst thing that can happen if you reach out is that they say no or they don't respond at all. And I actually think a no isn't a bad response at all, because at least you've opened a line of communication that you can hopefully build a connection with and nurture for potential future opportunities with the organization. Knowing someone on the inside, at least being on their radar, is more important and probably better than not reaching out at all. So just make sure if you really want to be out there shooting games at any kind of level, sending emails, sending messages, doing your outreach is one of the best things you can do long-term in your career. When it came to actually shooting the game, I treated it like any other sporting event I've shot in the past. I got there with enough time before kickoff. I introduced myself to everyone who I was working with on Canada Soccer side. I introduced myself to all the creatives that I was working with in the media room, all the photographers, all the videographers. Just small habits I've built over the last few years that have kind of put me in the best situation when shooting games, but also networking wise, making sure people know who you are, making people sure know who you're working for can really help you down the line, especially in a game when you might not be familiar with people, but also people may not be familiar with you. And even though I've shot a lot of sport games up to this point, my main objective here was what the client needed. That included getting scenics, that included getting fan shots. Even though it's a really cool opportunity and I'm really excited to be there, I have to remember that I offered value to a client and I have to get what they need first. So the first thing I did was go around the venue, get some scenics of the arena, go out into the stands, get shots of fans. Even though these are things that might take away from, things like warm-ups or shooting the athletes before the game, this is what the client needed. And at the end of the day, I want to do what I can to provide the value that I offered at the start. So those were my priorities right off the rip. After getting the scenics and the fan shots I had to get at the start, I then made my way down to field level and started getting shots of the players coming out for warm-ups. And before I knew it, it was kickoff time. For the game, my positioning on the field as a camera person was pretty limited for this one. Usually, I love to roam around and get as much coverage as possible, but Canada Soccer had like 4 or 5 cameras, including myself, who were covering this game, so they really just wanted me to stay on the north end by the end line and capture the game from that perspective. This unfortunately also meant I only got one half where Canada was attacking on my end, which obviously isn't ideal. I love to roam around, like I said, and get as much coverage as possible, but I had to understand my role here. I was working for a client and I was part of a bigger creative team, so I made sure to stay on my end the whole game and just make the best out of the scenario and do my best to get as much coverage as possible from one particular position. The main way I got variety in my shots in this case was making sure, even though I was restricted to one end of the field on the end line, I was moving around as much as I could and switching sides entirely from one side of the net to the other at the second half. Coverage is one of the more important things that I still have yet to talk about on this channel. Just making sure you're getting as many different angles and looks throughout the game is incredibly important for yourself if you're editing it, or especially more for a client who's editing this piece later. I want to give them as many different pieces of content as possible from as many different angles, so it's not just looking like I sat in one spot for the entire game. And one of the big things here is making sure I'm capturing action at both ends of the field. Even though during the second half Canada was attacking on the far end, I made sure I was rolling and I made sure I was shooting, even though it was a lot further than you could normally capture with a 70 to 200. I still got some great great looks from that second half, including two of the biggest goals of the game. The first one being Jamaica's goal, which came off an unbelievable free kick that honestly is probably one of my favorite frames ever. Sorry, Canada, if you're seeing this. And also, I got the game-winning goal from Canada, which is one of my most memorable ones as well, because in the background of the shot, you can see all the fans cheering and the flags waving. And for me, like, I got a really cool look at the first goal and a really close-up angle of the celebration, but for me, that shot of the girls celebrating with the fans in the background is such a pivotal moment for the game, and I think also just such a visual representation of how much Canada soccer has grown, and something that I think really summarized the night from the energy that the crowd was giving. One more thing I'm going to touch on is shooting B-roll. This was a really big thing that I put a focus on in this game, because as much as we all want to capture the big moments, the big goals and celebrations, that comes and goes in a sports game, especially in soccer. This was a game with only 3 goals scored, so I made a point of it to shoot as much B-roll as I could, and that included things like players attempting offensive plays, players tackling and playing defense, you know, ISOs and slow motion shots of players between whistles, you know, players battling for the ball. A lot of this B-roll is super key, especially if you want to make an edit after shooting a game. If you go to games just looking to shoot highlights and big moments, you're going to be in tough, especially if you need to edit a piece afterwards. In this scenario, I wanted to provide the client with as much content as possible, as much little things that they could do to fill up time in the video and showcase the environment, showcase the fans, the players, things that don't pertain to highlights in order to plant and lead up to those bigger moments in a game. And I think B-roll wise, some of my favorite shots from this game came from capturing close-ups or ISOs of the players. And I think player ISOs and close-ups are some of the most underrated shots you can get as a sports creative. Whether it's getting their facial reactions, slow motion shots of them walking across the field, them looking really dialed in, or engaging with each other and strategizing, these types of shots are so important when it comes to conveying the human element of sports and conveying emotion in an edit. I think seeing a shot of an athlete looking really dialed in or showing frustration can do so much more at times for telling a story than a big goal can, especially because a lot of these like little moments as athletes and humans you can use to build up to those big moments, which is what I did in my final edit when I created a piece for myself after the fact, is using emotion, using these player ISOs and close-ups to build up to the bigger moments of the game. And as the final whistle blows, my focus then turns to capturing the celebration, because in the grand scheme of things, this team just qualified for the freaking Olympics. And for any organization or sporting team, that is a huge accomplishment, but Canada Soccer in this case are the defending gold medalists, so the energy was incredibly high and pretty wild because they get to go back and defend their gold medal that they won a few years ago at the last Olympic Games. And when it comes to capturing post-game content, you really want to capture the human element that makes these people relatable. At the end of the day, I think a lot of people forget athletes are regular people just like you and me, but they just happen to be very, very good at their particular sport. And I made sure to capture a lot of these human moments in as many different ways as possible, whether it's players celebrating amongst themselves and enjoying their victory, whether it's them, you know, engaging with the fans, signing autographs, taking photos, or even them trying to find their family members and celebrating with their parents or their brothers and sisters or partners. All these moments can be really great shots to end videos on, but also some of the most memorable ones you may capture, and also could mean the most to the organization or the client you're shooting for. In this case, Canada Soccer, the big thing for them was showcasing the environment and the energy around the arena. So the shots of them engaging with the fans, the shots of them celebrating with the people who came to watch them was a really big deal for them and was in the back of my mind while I was capturing the celebration. And putting the client and yourself aside for a second, these moments of euphoria, these moments of pure human emotion and joy are so important to the athletes themselves. A lot of the time in the past, the organizations and teams I've worked with and the athletes themselves say that some of the shots that they treasure the most that I've ever captured for them were moments with their family after a game, were moments where they got to celebrate with their friends and really, you know, have those positive uplift moments. And that's what sports is all about, is celebrating at the end of the day, having a good time and reconnecting with people that you love over this sport that brings everyone together. So make sure that you're taking the time after any game to capture celebration moments. It shows that sport is a lot bigger than the one athletes or the team themselves. It involves everyone in and around, and it brings a human element to your videos. Now, finally, let's talk about the camera gear I used to shoot the game. And I don't want to take too long on this because camera gear isn't my favorite thing to talk about, but I know a lot of you guys are probably curious about the camera and the settings I use, so let's get right into it. For the camera of choice, no surprise here, if you're familiar with my channel, you know I shot this on my Sony a7S III, an unbelievable camera. I continue singing its praises to this day. I've had it for, I think, maybe almost 4 years now, and it continues to prove its worth and its value every time I use it shooting any kind of sport. Especially in this case, the low light capabilities of this camera came in handy. BMO Field is a great venue, especially with great lighting at night, but I still had to crank this to 12800 ISO to get a good image, and having that dual native ISO on this camera is a game changer whenever you're shooting at nighttime or any low light environment. Getting a clean image at a high ISO is a game changer, and one of the things I love the most about this camera. Lens wise, I brought 3 pieces of glass with me, which all serve different purposes at different points throughout the night. First up, my 16-35 GM Sony lens, which I'm actually shooting this video on right now. I realize I actually haven't talked about this lens on the channel. Picked it up about 6 months ago from a friend, and I absolutely love it. I used this for the establishing shots when I arrived at the arena, and I used it for shooting fans coming into the stadium. Amazing, amazing versatile lens, great quality. I will definitely have to talk about it more in the future. Next up, the 70-200 f4 by Sony. This is one of my favorite lenses to shoot sports with. If I only had to use one lens between everything I had, this is a pretty strong contender, and all the game action footage that you saw in that video was captured on this lens. It performs unbelievably, and I truly think it's the best bang for your buck lens for people who want to shoot sports and are on the Sony system. I have made videos in the past as to why I haven't upgraded to the 2.8, although the new Mark II has been really tempting because it solves a lot of the issues I had with the Mark I, especially when it comes to size and weight. But yeah, this was my main lens for game action. I love this thing. The quality is incredible and kind of proves to me that every time I use it, you really don't need 2.8 at times, especially using a body like the Sony a7S III, which is great in low light. But yeah, my main go-to lens for game action in this case was the 70-200 f4 by Sony. And finally, for the third lens I used during the game is old, reliable, and a familiar face on the channel, the 28-75 Tamron f2.8. This was the lens I used at the end of the game to capture the celebration and the moments with the fans and the family. I wanted something a little wider than this guy, and I wanted something with a little bit more punch than my 16-35, so this 28-75 was the perfect middle ground, and I'm glad I chose it. It allowed me to get wide shots at 28, and when I wanted to get kind of close-ups with players celebrating or talking to each other, this 75 focal length was perfect for that. I have raved about this lens before. It is a great bang for your buck, especially at that 24-70 range, which is probably the most versatile zoom lens you can buy, whether you're shooting sports or anything else. If you have to have one lens and you're not shooting anything like soccer, and I know I just said this was my favorite, but this is definitely my second favorite lens ever. So good in so many scenarios. If you guys are looking for a 24-70 equivalent that won't break the bank, look for the 28-75. I can't say enough good things about this lens. A few more notes on gear that I use. I shot the entire game with my camera on a monopod, which was an accessory I did not have until this summer. I ended up buying one for a few weddings I was shooting, and I cannot believe I haven't used it in sports up until this point, or even thought about buying one before, because this changed the game for me. A lot of people probably assumed I would have shot this handheld. Having a monopod for 45-minute halves while standing outside is such a game changer, not just for actual stability, but saving my back and the arms from being sore at the end of the day in the process. I really do think a monopod is one of the most underrated accessories any content creator can have. Fantastic accessory. If you can get your hands on one for any outdoor sports, trust me, huge benefit for so many different reasons. I love using it for sports, and I definitely will continue to do so. Another accessory that I have not talked much about on the channel because it's a more recent add to my camera rig is a V-mount battery that I use to power my camera throughout the entire game. I'm going to show you here the one I'm using, being very careful because I'm currently powering my camera with it. But I was using this ZJED Cine 99 volt V-mount battery. I used to use the regular Sony batteries that came with your camera. However, I noticed that whenever they would die and I was switching batteries, a lot of the times you're potentially missing action in front of you. These batteries last me an entire game. I only have one. I go into games with it at 100% charge, and I finish hockey games, football games, this soccer game with it with 30% battery left, so I could shoot even longer. So it's just a great investment for me in order to be able to shoot a game without having to miss moments. I'm not switching batteries. It's lasted me entire games, a great value add for me, and again, probably a really underrated accessory that not a lot of people think of, and I will make a future video about it because I think that's one of the best purchases I've made in the last few years. The last piece of gear I'm going to talk about today is the microphone I used to capture audio on my camera during the game, and that was the Godox VDS M2. And if you're not familiar with it, it's probably because number one, I've been normally using the Rode VideoMic NTG, but the good people at Godox were kind enough to send me out a few of their newer microphones that they've been developing. No, this isn't a sponsored video. They truly just like my content and wanted to send me some things to try out and to have. And their VDS M2 on-camera shotgun microphone has been an absolute steal of a microphone. I can't believe this thing sounds as good as it does, because I know Godox is definitely more of a lighting company, but they absolutely crushed it when it came to this microphone. Unbelievable quality, great features for a microphone this size. I really do think it's giving the Rode VideoMic NTG I have a run for its money. Again, thank you to the people at Godox for sending me it. Not a sponsored video, but I really do like this product. If you guys want to check it out, I'm going to leave it down in the description below. And that kind of does it for everything I wanted to talk about in this video. Shooting for the national team was such a dream come true and something I've always wanted to do, and bringing me one step closer to hopefully one day shooting a World Cup. And if you made it to this point in the video, thank you guys so much for sticking with me. I know it's definitely on the longer end of things, but I really did just want to pull back the curtain on how I go about getting access to games, pitching myself to teams, and the process I go about when I'm actually out of game shooting, the gear I'm using. I really do want to make more breakdowns like this in the future and give you guys as much insight as possible. So if you guys like this kind of video, if you guys enjoy it and learned something today, make sure to give it a like, make sure to leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you guys learned. Let me know what you guys want to learn more of. And also, if you guys haven't subscribed yet and you guys enjoy this kind of content, feel free to subscribe. It helps the channel grow, and I really, really do appreciate that. And that does it for me in this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.